I didn't mean to find the shop. It found me. It started like any other day, a coffee in hand, the comforting noise of traffic around me, and the crisp October air that always carried a faint metallic tang. I'd planned to spend the afternoon wandering through the older part of town, hunting for antique stores or a quiet spot to sketch. Instead, my steps faltered when I noticed a shop I'd never seen before, a perfume boutique, tucked into the shadow of a crumbling brick building. The wooden sign above the door read, "O Eternel," in faded gold lettering. A heavy sense of familiarity settled over me, though I couldn't place it. The windows were clouded, and the peeling doorframe gave no hint of the shop's charm within. But something compelled me to step inside. The scent hit me first. It wasn't one aroma, but a symphony of them, floral and musky, sweet and acrid, the kind of smell that carried memories you didn't know you had. It tugged at the edges of my consciousness like a half-forgotten song. The interior was dimly lit, the walls lined with dusty glass shelves holding bottles of every shape and size. A crystal chandelier hung precariously overhead, its light barely piercing the gloom. I didn't see anyone. No shopkeeper, no customers. Just me and the perfumes. As I wandered, my fingers brushed the bottles. Some were smooth, others rough, their designs intricate and strange. It wasn't until I reached the farthest corner of the shop that I saw it. A small, unassuming bottle with a deep red liquid inside. The label was hand-painted, its letters swirling in an elegant script. Crossroads Eternity. My hand moved to pick it up before I even realized what I was doing. It was cold, impossibly so, as though it had been locked away in ice. A single thought whispered through my mind, just one spray. I pressed the nozzle. The scent was intoxicating, a blend of sandalwood and something sharp, like ozone before a storm. It flooded my senses, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Then came the darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was back in bed. At first, I thought I had dreamed it, but everything about the morning felt wrong. The radio played the same song as the day before, my phone buzzed with the same messages, and the coffee I poured tasted eerily familiar. By the time I retraced my steps and found myself standing before the shop again, I knew something was off. Inside, the scent enveloped me like an old friend. The same rows of bottles lined the shelves, the same shadows danced on the walls. And there was again Crossroads Eternity. My hand reached for it involuntarily. This time, I fought it, setting the bottle back down. I thought I could leave, but I didn't. Not really. The day ended as days do, and then it began again. Each time, I told myself I wouldn't go back. But no matter how I tried to avoid the boutique, my steps would carry me there. My excuses grew weaker. I'll just peek inside, or I'll only hold the bottle. Each loop, the urge to spray it grew more unbearable. The shop began to change, too. At first, I noticed flickers in the corners of my vision, shadows that didn't belong. Then came the figures. Translucent forms that hovered near the shelves, their faces twisted in silent screams. They didn't move, only stared, their eyes filled with terror. I realized they weren't just shadows. They were people. One day, in the reflection of the chandelier's crystals, I caught sight of myself. My face was pale, my eyes sunken. I wasn't just caught in the loop. I was becoming part of it. My body felt less real, my steps heavier, as though the shop was siphoning pieces of me away with every passing day. Desperation consumed me. On my 50th, or perhaps my 100th, loop, I grabbed Crossroads Eternity with trembling hands. My reflection shimmered in the glass, warped and cracked. No more, I whispered. With all my strength, I hurled the bottle to the floor. The red liquid splattered across the tiles like blood. The room seemed to exhale, and for a moment, I thought I was free. But then I saw the shards. Each fragment of glass held a piece of me, 1,000 tiny reflections, each one staring back with wide, terrified eyes. My breath caught as the images began to shift, blending with the faces of the figures I'd seen in the shop. Their anguish was now my own. I felt the pull. My body moved without my consent, drawn into the largest shard. The world turned cold as I stepped into my own reflection, and the glass sealed behind me. Now I stand here, just another face in the shop's collection. The loops are gone, but the nightmare continues. I watch, helpless, as new customers wander in, their curiosity sealing their fate. The boutique remains timeless, eternal, and so am I. The train hummed beneath us, a soothing rhythm that matched the steady snowfall outside. Caleb and I had been planning this trip for months. A romantic journey through the Swiss Alps. Just the two of us, enveloped by the kind of beauty that seemed untouched by time. The snow-covered peaks blurred into a dreamscape as the train curved along the edge of a precipice. I leaned into Caleb's shoulder, letting the warmth of his presence distract me from the growing unease I couldn't quite place. "I told you this would be amazing," he said, squeezing my hand. His grin, always so contagious, brought me back to the moment. But as we approached a narrow tunnel carved into the mountains, the comforting vibrations of the train faltered almost imperceptibly. The overhead lights flickered, throwing jagged shadows across the cabin walls. "Did you feel that?" I asked. Caleb frowned, tilting his head. "It's just an old train, Emma. Probably nothing." The moment we entered the tunnel, everything changed. The world outside vanished into an oppressive darkness, and the train screeched to an abrupt halt. The silence that followed wasn't natural. It was suffocating. "Why did we stop?" Caleb muttered, peering out the window. "I don't know," I whispered, though dread was already curling in my stomach. A faint noise reached us from the adjoining car, a shuffling sound like footsteps dragging across the floor. Caleb glanced at me, his expression cautious. "Stay here," he said, standing up. "No, don't." But he was already sliding the cabin door open. The air outside felt colder, heavier, as though the tunnel itself was pressing down on us. A man appeared at the far end of the car, his uniform crisp and old-fashioned, like a conductor from another era. He held a lantern that cast a dim, flickering glow, but his face was obscured by shadows. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a voice that sounded like it had traveled from the depths of the tunnel itself, "your journey has been delayed. Please remain in your seats." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Caleb took a step forward, and I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I hissed. The conductor turned toward us, his movements unervingly slow. Though I couldn't see his eyes, I felt them settle on me, heavy and knowing. Caleb hesitated, but eventually stepped back into the cabin, sliding the door shut. We waited in silence, watching as the conductor disappeared into the next car. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt slippery in the dark. Caleb stood abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. "I'm going to see what's going on," he said, his tone resolute. "No, Caleb, please. Something's wrong. Emma, we can't just sit here." I wanted to argue, but the cabin door was already closing behind him. I waited and waited. The longer he was gone, the harder it became to breathe. The cabin felt smaller, the walls pressing in like the tunnel itself was trying to swallow me whole. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I opened the door and stepped into the car. The air was freezing now, each breath a visible puff of mist. "Caleb?" I called, my voice barely more than a whisper. The train seemed endless, stretching into the darkness. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the floor itself were resisting me. When I reached the end of the car, I opened the door to the next one and found myself back in our cabin. The sight of my coat draped over the seat hit me like a physical blow. I spun around, but the door behind me had vanished. I was trapped. I tried again and again. Every time, I ended up back in the same place. Panic clawed at my chest. "Caleb!" I screamed. The cabin door slid open, and the conductor stepped inside. His lantern illuminated his face now, a pale, sunken mask with hollow eyes that seemed to peer straight through me. "Where is he?" I demanded. The conductor tilted his head, a grotesque parody of curiosity. "He's gone," he said simply. "It's just you now." "No," I said, backing away. "No, you're lying." But deep down, I already knew the truth. The memories I'd buried for so long were clawing their way to the surface, pieces falling into place. The train, the tunnel, the accident. I hadn't wanted to remember. "You're not real," I whispered, clutching my head. "Neither are you." the conductor replied, his voice echoing like the tunnel itself. I stumbled back into my seat, the weight of the truth crushing me. This wasn't a journey. It was a purgatory, a loop, a punishment. And Caleb? He was never here. I don't know how long I sat there, staring out the window at the darkness. Time had no meaning here. Eventually, the train began to move again, the motion slow and deliberate. Light seeped into the cabin as we emerged from the tunnel, the glow growing brighter until it was blinding. The conductor reappeared, his lantern extinguished. He held out a hand. "It's time," he said. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. "Where does it go?" I asked. His smile was cold and thin. "That depends on you." I stepped off the train into the light, unsure if I was breaking free or surrendering to it. Either way, I wasn't going back.